Love leaves scars, and some never heal. This is Burned by Love. I met Lucas during a night art class I joined on a whim. My life at the time was a blur of dull routines: work, eat, sleep, repeat. The silence in my apartment had grown louder, heavier, as if it had weight. I needed something, anything, to distract me. I didn't expect that someone would be that distraction. He was already there when I arrived on the first night, sitting in the farthest corner of the room, working on a canvas with deep focus. The painting was of a sunflower, but it wasn't yellow or gold. It was dark red, almost brown, like dried blood. It startled me a little, but also intrigued me. When he noticed me staring, he didn't look away. "I just don't like yellow," he said, softly, with a small shrug. "That color's too optimistic, feels like a lie." His words stuck with me. I didn't know how to respond, but something about the way he said it, the ease, the quiet confidence, made me sit down beside him the next time, and the next. Somehow, it just felt natural. I wasn't any good at painting hands. Mine always ended up looking like rubber gloves or spaghetti. Lucas noticed, but he never laughed. Instead, he offered tips. Simple things like, don't overthink the knuckles, or try sketching the bone structure first. He had a quiet patience, the kind that made you feel like your mistakes were okay, that you were okay. He wasn't the chatty type. In fact, most of our early conversations were short, simple exchanges. But when he did speak, his words carried weight. "If you love painting the sea," he said one evening as we cleaned our brushes, "maybe you're trying to escape. Maybe the ocean feels like the only place you can disappear." I hadn't said anything beyond, "I like painting waves." That was it. And yet, it was like he saw through me. I walked home that night with a strange knot in my chest, a mix of wonder and unease. Who was this man? How could someone I barely knew read me so easily? 2 months passed. We became close, though I couldn't say what we were. Not friends, not lovers, something in between. There were no romantic gestures, no flowers or candlelit dinners, but Lucas somehow always knew when I needed to talk and when I needed silence. He never pushed, never pried. It was comforting. Until the night I dropped by his apartment. It wasn't planned. I brought cheap, instant ramen and joked about how we were both starving artists, emphasis on starving. We laughed, talked about brushstroke techniques, color palettes. He showed me a few pieces he was working on. Then I saw it. A canvas propped against the wall, half covered by a cloth that had slipped slightly. My heart froze. It was me, sleeping, peaceful, vulnerable, exposed. My hair fanned out across a pillow, hands folded on my chest. And I had no memory of ever posing like that. Lucas noticed where my eyes had landed. He moved fast, pulling the cloth over the canvas like it burned him. "Just a shadow study," he said quickly. "Sometimes I paint from memory or imagination." I nodded, trying to mask the confusion on my face. Maybe I had fallen asleep on his couch before, once or twice maybe. But that pose, that angle, it felt too precise, too exact. That night, I left earlier than usual. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Or maybe I had just begun to notice what was already there. Back home, I scrolled through my phone. Maybe I'd taken a sleepy selfie at his place, something he used as reference. Maybe he saw a post on my social media. But there was nothing, no photo that matched. And I was always careful about privacy. Lucas had never touched my phone. I tried to dismiss it. He was just eccentric, an artist. Maybe he made it up in his mind. But something about it wouldn't leave me alone. A week later, during class, I was exhausted after a long shift and accidentally nodded off for a few minutes. Just a quick nap. When I woke up, Lucas was painting again, but this time he turned his canvas away so fast it was like he'd been caught stealing something. He smiled at me, that same warm smile, but it felt wrong. From that moment on, something in me shifted. His warmth now felt like a mask, and I couldn't stop wondering what was underneath it. I couldn't stop thinking about that painting. The version of me that Lucas captured on canvas, so precise, so intimate. It didn't feel like art anymore. It felt like surveillance. Maybe that should have been the end. Maybe I should have walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself back at Lucas's apartment a week later, under the pretense of borrowing a brush set I'd accidentally left behind. He wasn't home. The spare key was still under the planter by his door, something he'd casually mentioned one night over coffee. Inside, the apartment was silent, except for the slow hum of a mini fan. The lights were off. I moved carefully, my guilt rising with every step. I knew I shouldn't be there. But I also knew something was off, and I needed answers. In the far corner of the room, behind his usual easel and stacks of paint tubes, was a large wooden cabinet I hadn't noticed before. Its doors were closed, a latch keeping it shut. I hesitated only for a second before unhooking it. Inside, sketchbooks. Dozens of them. At first, they looked ordinary. Thumbnail drawings, studies of hands, portraits of strangers. But the more I flipped through them, the more familiar the faces became. My face. Over and over again. Me laughing, me crying, me staring blankly into space. Poses I recognized from memory, and some I didn't. One image sent a chill through me. A sketch of me sitting at my desk at work, wearing the exact outfit I'd worn 3 months ago on a rainy Tuesday. It had rained only twice that month. I remembered because my shoes had soaked through. He'd drawn me from behind, from across the street. The angle was perfect. How? My pulse started to race. I kept going. The further I dug, the more detailed the sketches became. My old bedroom, before I'd moved, the kitchen in my parents' house, a park bench I used to sit on as a kid. I found myself flipping faster, no longer breathing evenly. And then, there it was. A drawing of me at 9 years old, wearing a dress I remembered hating, my front teeth still uneven, my hair tied in the way my mother used to do it before school. I was standing in front of the swings at my old elementary school. I dropped the sketchbook. There was no way he could have drawn that. I hadn't met Lucas until a year ago. And yet, this was me. This wasn't copied from a Facebook photo or some old family album. This wasn't digital stalking. It was hand-drawn, full of detail, lines that suggested presence, memory. And in that moment, one terrifying thought took root in my mind and refused to let go. He's been watching me for longer than I've known. The front door opened. I froze. Clara? Lucas's voice was calm, almost cheerful, like nothing was wrong, like this wasn't completely insane. I grabbed the sketchbook of my childhood self and turned toward him. "What is this?" I asked, holding it up like a weapon. He stared at the book, then at me. His face didn't change. "You weren't supposed to see that one yet," he said quietly. Yet. The word echoed in my skull like a gunshot. I felt the walls closing in. I dropped the book, shoved past him, and ran down the hallway without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I reported Lucas to the police. I sent them photos of the sketches, described the images, the stalking. They opened an investigation. But within days, Lucas had vanished. His apartment was cleared out, his phone disconnected, and not a single neighbor remembered seeing him leave. The case made local news for a week. Obsessed artist disappears after being accused by Muse. The headline made me sick. But after a few weeks, it was over. People moved on. Except me. Because I knew Lucas wasn't just gone. He was waiting. 5 years passed. I changed my number. I moved cities. I changed jobs. I cut my hair. I deleted every social media account I owned. I even legally changed my last name. I told myself it was over. Lucas was gone. The police never found him. No digital trail, no sightings, nothing. But the fear never really left me. Some nights I'd wake up gasping for air, certain someone was standing over my bed. I checked every lock 3 times before going to sleep. I kept a knife under my pillow for a year, just in case. Eventually, the panic dulled into background noise. I got married. Not to someone like Lucas. Nate was warm, open, safe. He knew about my past, at least the parts I was willing to say out loud. He accepted that some nights I still woke up screaming. He held me until I could breathe again. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, had a daughter. For the first time in years, I believed I could start over. Until the letter came. It arrived in a plain white envelope, tucked neatly between bills and advertisements. No return address, no stamp, just my name in black ink. My new name, one I'd only used for the past 4 years. Inside, a single sheet of thick paper. On it, hand-drawn in charcoal. My daughter, age 5, sleeping in her bed. The sketch was perfect. Too perfect. Her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched tight in her arms. Her unruly curls pushed back by the same headband she wore to bed every night. The curve of her cheek pressed against the pillow. The tiny scar above her eyebrow from falling off her scooter. I dropped the paper like it burned me. I couldn't breathe. He'd found me. No message, no threat, just the drawing. A quiet, horrifying reminder. I'm still watching. I ran to her room. She was there, safe, asleep, exactly like the sketch. I called the police, again, reported everything, again. But they had nothing to go on. No fingerprints, no security footage, no forced entry, no signs of trespassing. Our alarm system had stayed silent. They offered patrols, sympathy, and little else. Nate tried to be calm, tried to be rational. It could be a prank, he said, though his voice shook. Someone from your past? A friend of Lucas? A coincidence? But we both knew the truth. It was him. Lucas had never really disappeared. He had just waited. And the worst part? He'd drawn my daughter the same way he used to draw me. Like a memory he didn't want to forget. That night, I sat in the dark, holding the sketch in my trembling hands, asking myself the question I had buried for years. Who is he, really? Because this wasn't just obsession. It was something deeper, older. I remembered that sketch of me as a child. I remembered the park I hadn't been to since I was 8. The house my family had sold a decade ago. The way he'd known things about me I'd never said out loud. And suddenly, one terrifying realization struck me cold. What if Lucas didn't find me 5 years ago? What if he had always been there? Not a stranger, but a shadow. A ghost that chose to take shape in my life at the perfect moment. And now, he'd chosen my daughter.
I couldn't sleep after the sketch arrived. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of shadow outside the window, every slight noise made my heart jolt. I started leaving a nightlight on in my daughter's room. I installed new locks. Nate begged me to stop spiraling, but I knew Lucas was close. And not just physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually even. He was in our home, in our heads. One morning, while Nate took our daughter to the park to distract her from the tension clouding our house, I sat in the attic surrounded by old cardboard boxes. Dust coated my hands and knees as I tore through piles of old photographs, family records, birth certificates, anything that might tell me more about my own childhood. If Lucas had been watching me for that long, why? And then I found it. A small box labeled Mom, Private. I hesitated. My mother died when I was 16. We weren't especially close. She was secretive, guarded. I never questioned it much at the time. But now, for the first time, I wondered if she had her own shadows, ones she had never wanted me to see. I opened the box. Inside were yellowing newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and several old photographs. One in particular stopped me cold. A black and white picture of my mother, probably in her early 20s, smiling beside a tall man with deep-set eyes and an odd, intense expression. I flipped the photo over. Rachel plus Lucas, 1986. I couldn't breathe. Lucas. The same name, the same eyes. He looked younger, yes, but the smile, the quiet intensity in his posture, it was unmistakable. He had known my mother, and not just known her, been close to her. They were standing side by side, arms touching, like lovers or best friends. A second photo showed the same man again, this time standing in the background of a hospital hallway. My mother was holding a baby. Me. I dropped the photo. My hands were shaking. What was he doing there? Why had my mother never told me? I kept digging. There were more notes, letters my mother had written but never sent, pages torn from journals, fragments of stories I was never meant to know. He keeps showing up. I told him it's over. He doesn't listen. He says he just wants to protect Clara. He says he's always been protecting her. But from what? I saw him again today, outside the daycare, watching. I should have known better than to trust him back then, but I didn't know what he really was. He paints her, even now. I told him if he comes near her again, I'll go to the police. He just smiled and said, "You'll forget. You always do." Terror clawed at my throat. My mother had known. She had tried to protect me. And Lucas, he'd been around since I was a baby, watching, sketching, protecting. But from what? The last thing in the box was a manila folder marked "Do not open unless something happens." Inside, a flash drive. I ran downstairs, plugged it into my laptop, and opened the only file on it, a grainy, dated video, time-stamped August 1992. It opened with my mother sitting in front of a camera, looking younger than I'd ever seen her. "Clara," she began, voice trembling, "if you're watching this, it means he's come back, and I'm probably not around anymore to warn you. His name is Lucas, but that's not really his name. I don't know what he is. He doesn't age. He doesn't forget. I met him when I was 16. He said he wanted to paint me, said he could see things in people, and for a while it felt romantic." She wiped her eyes. "But then I realized
He wasn't in love with me. He was studying me. And when I tried to leave, he said it didn't matter, that he was already waiting for my daughter, that he'd always known her, that he'd drawn her before she was even born. The video cut out there. I stared at the screen, numb. Lucas hadn't just stalked me. He hadn't just been obsessed with my mother. I packed a bag before dawn. No goodbye letter, no warning. Nate would panic when he woke up and found me gone, but I had no choice. If I told him where I was going, he'd try to stop me, or worse, follow me. I couldn't risk either of them, not Nate, not our daughter. I was going back to where it all started, to the cabin in the woods. My mother had mentioned it in one of her letters. He paints there, deep in the forest. It's the only place he ever lets his guard down. She said it like it was a sacred place, or cursed. It was a 4-hour drive from the city, the kind of remote area with no cell service, no GPS, no neighbors for miles, just trees and silence. I found the cabin right before sunset. It looked like something from a dream, or a nightmare. The wood was weathered, dark, and covered in vines. The windows were blacked out. The porch sagged. The front door creaked open with the slightest push. No luck. Of course not. He didn't need one. Inside, the air smelled like oil paint and decay. And canvas. Hundreds of them. Stacked against the walls, hanging from rafters, spread across the floor. All of them were portraits. At first, I thought they were all of me, but then I looked closer. There were generations of faces, all women, some young, some old, all with the same eyes. My mother's eyes. And one canvas still wet. My daughter, sleeping, again. Same as the sketch, but this time, behind her, a shadowed figure standing in the doorway. I spun around, heart pounding. He stood there, Lucas, exactly the same as the day I last saw him. Not a single wrinkle, not a single change, as if time hadn't touched him. "I knew you'd come," he said softly, as if this were a reunion. "Who are you?" I whispered. He smiled, not kindly. "You already know." "No, I don't. My mother thought you were human. She was wrong, wasn't she?" His eyes darkened. "I'm not what your mother feared. I'm what she invited." I stepped back. "You were never in love with her." "No, I was protecting her, preparing her, just like I've done for generations." My stomach turned. Preparing her for what? He moved toward me slowly, like a priest giving a sermon. "For the next one. The next you." The women in these portraits, they are all part of a line, a lineage that stretches back centuries, all gifted, all watched, all preserved. I choked out the words, preserved. Firelight. Lucas didn't scream. He just stood there, watching, as if he was relieved, as if this had always been the plan. I stumbled out of the cabin, coughing, eyes burning. I didn't stop until I reached the car. I drove until the smoke disappeared behind the trees, until the road reappeared, until the world felt real again. I never found his body. There was no report, no evidence, just ashes. I returned home, held my daughter tighter, watched the sun rise without fear for the first time in years. But sometimes, late at night, I see her drawing sketches of people she's never met,
with eyes too old for her age. And once, she drew a man, tall, still, smiling. She called him the Watcher. And I realized maybe I hadn't ended anything. Maybe I just passed it on. Some stories don't end. They just change forms. Clara thought she destroyed the darkness, but some legacies are harder to burn. And sometimes what we leave behind finds its way back, especially when it's been watching all along. If this story gave you chills, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more twisted tales of love, loss, and the things we try to bury but never really escape. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if your past came back through your child's eyes? Until next time, stay haunted.